let's dive into the topic of health issues coming out of nowhere. And you guys have all probably known somebody who's had this. Either, they are the marathon runner who drops dead of a heart attack or gets diagnosed with heart disease. It may be somebody who is quote unquote healthy and then they get a cancer diagnosis, or it may be a host of other things. Just go ahead and take a moment right now, and if you know somebody like this, put a comment in the bottom. Let everybody know kind of what's going on. In the meantime, I'm Dr. Jeff Cumro. I'm a developmental function neurologist, and basically what we focus on is looking at the origins of health. Like, how do we get somebody healthy? And it ultimately comes back to balance. Physical, mental, emotional, left to right, front to back, top to bottom. When we can get you balanced, that's ultimately what health is, that ability to return to that rested normal state. And a lot of people are lacking this. And it really is a big part of why people are ending up with these diagnoses, quote unquote, out of nowhere. A lot of these people kind of go in with some sort of issue. And I'll give you two examples. I recently had a family member that passed away from cancer. And they weren't the healthiest person going in, but they weren't the least healthy person going in either. If you would talk to the doctor, they had no idea that anything was going on. She was diabetic, and metabolic plays a huge role in a lot of this, and we're going to get into that in a moment. But she also had autoimmunity, and when you combine metabolic issues and immune issues, cancer is a little higher propensity. So, it's something that it didn't necessarily come out of nowhere, but it doesn't hurt any less when things like that happen, right? Another example is a child I know recently got sick. After being sick for about a week, went back to school, and anxiety, anger issues, emotionality, everything just through the roof. And this has gone on for a few months, and we're working on calming that down right now. But it came out of nowhere, right? Yes, they got sick, but it came out of nowhere. Now, looking at labs, I don't know that it came out of nowhere, because again, we see metabolic issues on the previous labs. Didn't know exactly where they were coming from, still don't know exactly where they're coming from, but that's something that we can work on. And a lot of these things come back to metabolism. And the reason that metabolism is such a big issue with this, if you don't have the ability to run energy to every system, you have to steal from other systems, correct? So it's kind of like our power grid. Our power grid is designed so that you get your power from one main company, and that company makes power, or they buy it from other places. But if they make their power, they are making X amount, and they may have the ability to turn on more generators to produce more. They may have to buy it if they don't have enough. Rolling blackouts are a good example of this. Or a couple of years ago when it got really, really cold down in Texas, they were pulling power from other companies, and other companies charge an astronomical amount. So it made big headlines on this. Up until that, a lot of people didn't realize that that's what happens is, if there is a cold snap in one part of the country, other power grids can redirect their power to those areas so that, they have enough power supply for everybody to run all of their stuff. If you don't do that, that's where blackouts and things like that are a necessity. Obviously, that's dangerous. If it overloads the system and you have a blackout and it's, heat of summer, people aren't able to run their air conditioner, that's dangerous. If they aren't able to run their furnaces, that's dangerous. Same thing happens in the body though. We are reliant on multiple different metabolic systems. So if you have your primary metabolic capabilities that are compromised in some way, we have to pull from other systems. You may realize an exercise is a good example of this. So like anaerobic versus aerobic, you're using different mechanisms to make the energy in those processes. So with anaerobic, you're doing it without oxygen. With aerobic, you're doing it with oxygen. So two totally different systems. This is also what you bring in when you fast. So if you fast for a longer period of time, you're not using that glycogen that's in your muscles stored. You're using more of the other metabolic capabilities. You're using mitochondria to make energy and whatnot. So there are multiple different systems throughout the body. And when we start pulling from those different systems and we don't have enough capability, then we start seeing things shut down. And it may be a part of the brain. This is what goes on in neurodevelopmental disorders. If we don't have enough metabolism in an area, that's where you have imbalance between the two sides. The one side might have good metabolism, it might be functional. The other side might have low metabolism and be a little less functional. When you have that imbalance, you set yourself up for other issues. That may be emotionality, it may be learning disorders, it may be a host of other things, endocrine disorders, or whatever else. But there are those underlying things. And that is the point of this. A lot of these things do not come out of nowhere. I've lived it myself. When I was 22, 23 years old, I just graduated college. I was working 6 to 7 part-time jobs because I couldn't find a full-time job, and I was running myself a little too thin. I was working 75 hours a week, trying to get 4 hours of sleep a night and keep going, and it wasn't working. And yes, my autoimmune diagnosis came out of nowhere, but it didn't come out of nowhere because I wasn't taking care of myself. Sooner or later, you get far enough behind and you get that. So it might be autoimmunity, or it might be major allergies, or it might be emotional issues or mental health issues, or it might be cancer or whatever else. But the point is, those don't come out of nowhere. In most cases, they're building. And what does that look like? What do you do for something like this? And a lot of people have signs and symptoms, they just tend to ignore them. So if you have high blood pressure, that might be a sign of a bigger issue. Cholesterol might be a sign of a bigger issue. Any kind of metabolic, whether it's diabetic or acidosis or anything like that, those could be issues. Breathing issues are huge in something like this. If you can't get oxygen, the way that you make energy is you have to attach that oxygen molecule onto the energy for it to actually be usable. So if you don't have a good way to oxygenate, that can cause problems. So there are a ton of different ways that this can happen throughout the body. There are a ton of different signs. And that's what I really want to encourage you to do, is get a functional analysis. Like that functional analysis, it really needs to include lab work. But get a functional analysis and see where the health of your brain and body are. Are you balanced? Are you imbalanced? What are the areas that are functional? What are the areas that are a little less functional? Look at those labs. Which areas are you excelling in? Which areas are you not quite optimal in? And I'm in disagreement with the current mechanism that we use on looking at blood work. And the reason I'm in a disagreement with that is we use a standard deviation. So 96% of the population is considered normal, 2% high and 2% low are considered abnormal. So if you are in that 2% either way, you get an abnormal diagnosis and it gets flagged. Now, are 96% of us healthy? I don't think so. With that, how can we compare to 96% of other people? Doesn't make any sense if we're really looking for health. If health is our goal, we have to know where we're at on the map, right? What we really need to use are the ideal measures for these things. And when we have our target within that smaller range, into that healthy range, into that functional range, that's ultimately where health is going to lie. So you've got to find somebody who's willing to look a little bit differently at labs. You've got to find somebody who's able to do this functional diagnosis, functional analysis. Because if we can't look at everything, where is your muscle strength? How is your blood work looking? What are you doing, as far as mental capacity? Like, where are you with the different firing in those areas? Because if we have imbalances in the brain, that's where we end up with any kind of mental illnesses or learning disorders or autoimmunity or a host of other things. They're finding that obesity is a neurodevelopmental disorder. So there are way more things than people realize that we're finding that have these underlying things that we didn't ever know about before. And the great news about it is we're able to change that. So if we know where they're at, we're able to make changes, just like on lab work. If you need a supplement, you can take a supplement. Or if you need to change your diet, you can change your diet. It tells you right there what you need to do. Same thing when we know what we're looking for in the brain and the body. If we see that weakness, we can stimulate that weakness, whether it's in the brain or the body. We can stimulate that and help to bring up that metabolism. And when we bring up that metabolism and that functionality, that's where you experience balance. And like we talked at the very beginning, that's where health lies. You are always going to get out of balance. It doesn't matter what you do. You're going to get out of balance to do anything in life. Sometimes you have to focus on work. Sometimes you have to focus on your family. Sometimes you have to talk. Sometimes you have to not talk. There are a million different ways that we get unbalanced. Every one of those requires an imbalanced state, but we have to be able to return to balance to actually experience health. So again, I'm Dr. Jeff Cumro. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Do me a favor here. If this is helpful, hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really, really gives me a good idea of what information is giving you guys the keys that you need. Obviously, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my own time. So if this isn't helpful, just skip it, and we won't share information like this anymore. If it is helpful, we can dive a little deeper and share similar topics. So that would be something that will help me out. I greatly appreciate you, and I can't wait to see you on the next one.